Alive. I have with me today Congressman Frank Lucas. Congressman Lucas is a fifth generation Oklahoman. He's been the chairman of the Agriculture Committee. He's been the chairman of the Space and Science Committee, and just been a steadfast supporter of all things innovation, all things agriculture, and all things financial services throughout Oklahoma. And as we were in the car today, he told me, because he tells this story pretty often actually, that that without his experience and his time here in Stillwater, he wouldn't be in Congress because he learned so much coming from his small community and getting to exposure to the community and getting to learn just all sorts of great life stories. So we're excited to have Congressman Lucas. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. And obviously, I should pay close attention should you decide to run in the primary someday as to what would happen in Stillwater. Thank you all. And Nathan's exactly right. I am very fond of this community, and I'm very fond of this institution. And I came from a very small, still live in a very small community in North Roger Mills County. I went to a dependent school district. Yes, they used to have those kind of things, Nathan. And I graduated in 8th grade class of 13. My high school class at Cheyenne was 40, the biggest class for years before or after. My first attempt at wheat farming was as an FFA member in high school. I did so well that first year that I cashed in my dorm bond and went to a year of junior college to put my finances back together. Wheat farming can be a challenge in the world we live in, which also makes me very sensitive about farm bill processes. And then I came to Oklahoma State as a sophomore. My 3.5 years at the university, my 3.5 years in this community provided me with really some of my most eye-opening, mind-expanding experiences. Because I'd never been around not just the cultural diversity that we have in Stillwater and at Oklahoma State. It was a difference of thought. The folks I interacted with in AggieX and the Student Government Association, the political clubs, it was just a mind-expanding process. Not everybody thought exactly like everybody else in North Roger Mills County. And that, which by the way is not a bad way to think about things, but still it provided me with a mind-opening, expanding experience. So with that said, I left Oklahoma State, went back to farm. A couple of years back home, my neighbors said to me, you know, you keep talking about making a difference. You keep talking about doing things differently. You keep talking about all this idealistic stuff. Why don't you do something about it? And they persuaded me to run for the legislature, Rep. And that truly is a hands-on experience. I didn't win the first time and the second time I ran, but I won the third time. And for 5.5 years, I represented 6 counties in far west and northwest Oklahoma. Not the Panhandle, but far west and northwest Oklahoma. And in 1994, back when we still had 6 congressional districts, and you were attached to the southeastern Oklahoma district at the time, my predecessor, Glenn English, up and decided after 19 years he wanted to do something differently. And my neighbors once again said, you keep talking about making a difference. Everybody knows that the real problems are not at the state capitol. The real problems are in Washington, D.C. Why don't you go do something about it? So with their encouragement and a bunch of your neighbors to the west, I launched into a campaign. Now, I'll accelerate my comments because I know in this timid body known as Rotary, we'll have some lively give and take. But the amazing thing, 2 amazing things about my special election 1994. One, I was in a 5-person Republican primary when I started off. And I had a state senator from Oklahoma City who was a part of the field. I had a state representative from Canadian County who was a part of the field. I had a competitor from Enid, Oklahoma, an oily, part of the field, and a car dealer from Guymon, Oklahoma. So amongst the 4 counties that they came from, they had 75% of the potential primary vote in their 4 home counties. I had 126 registered Republicans in my home county. I had 0.2 of 1 percentage point of the primary vote. Now, what does that mean? Yeah, clearly I'm a wheat farmer and an optimist at heart. Clearly I didn't mind pushing the boulder up the field. But sometimes having to work at it a little harder or a lot harder is a good thing. Because if you don't have the determination to get there, what are you going to accomplish when you do? So With redistricting in 2002, we went from 6 members to 5. Stillwater, Payne County returned to the old traditional Northwest Oklahoma Congressional District, and you became mine for the last 20 plus some years. And it's been a privilege representing you. Once again, as Nathan alluded to, I serve on the Ag Committee. Past chairman, did the 14 Farm Bill. I retired off of the Science Committee after 22 years at the beginning of this session, having served as vice chairman, ranking member, and chairman. And we can talk about Martians if you'd care to. We can talk about the National Science Foundation if you'd care to. We could talk about a variety of things. My other committee assignment at the present time, where I'm the longest serving Republican, Republican, is financial services. And you say, well, you're an ag econ guy, you're a wheat farmer by trade, a cow-calf operator, why are you on the Banking and Financial Services Committee? Well, what's the one common theme throughout agriculture, energy, Main Street, for that matter, the whole state of Oklahoma? We are capital starved. We operate on borrowed money. So the committee with jurisdiction over the cost of and the availability of capital credit made logical sense. Now, enough with the background. Where are we at in this session of Congress? And I'll try and speed up a little bit faster. It's always good to talk about the political lay of the land because that determines the legislative lay of the land. What is the political lay of the land? Well, the voters had a really good sense of humor a year and a half ago when we had our last general elections. And in the House, I'm a member of the majority today because there are 4 more R's than there are D's in the United States House. And at a point for a number of weeks, because of deaths, retirements, convictions, we had a 1-seat majority in the United States House. It's hard, right, Trish? It's hard to make things function when you have a 1-seat majority. So there were times when we didn't have session, do real business for several days at a time because a plane was late, flu epidemic was outbroke in one state, or a funeral or whatever. But it's hard. But in the House of Representatives, United States House, simple majority wins. Might take 9 months, 9 days, 9 weeks, 9 hours. But when you get to 217, whether it's on a political issue or an economic issue or a geographical issue, some philosophical issue, the majority prevails. But it's a close margin in the House. The other body, where Senator Armstrong now represents us, along with Senator Langford, they have a 53-seat Republican majority in the United States Senate. But that's really kind of deceiving because under Senate rules, a simple majority can confirm judges. A simple majority, 50% plus 1, can pass something called a budget reconciliation bill once a budget cycle. But everything else is subject to the filibuster rule. And what does that mean? And again, I'm a House member. State House, U.S. House. Last time I was a senator, I was in SGA up the hill here. SGA. Never going to be a senator again. And that's just fine with me. I'm too young to go to the nursing homes, but I didn't say that. I didn't say that. But in the United States Senate, when a senator takes to the floor, he or she can speak until the end of the 2-year term or Gabriel blows the horn. And sometimes you would wish something would happen quickly. So if you don't have 60 votes, you're not really in control. And 53-47 means once you get away from judges and something called reconciliation, you have to have a bipartisan understanding. You have to have 60 votes to end the debate, to move, to proceed, to do something. So the voters had a real sense of humor. Now add on top of that, the very timid fellow who's president of the United States, who's very laid back, who doesn't ever change his mind, and that adds another element to the process of what we deal with. So has anything happened that's positive? Yeah, some positive things have happened. Let's touch on that for a moment, and then we'll talk about the things that need to be done, and then we'll discuss what you want to be done, the positive things. Probably the biggest accomplishment of this 2-year session of Congress was passing the so-called Big Beautiful Bill back at the beginning of this 2-year cycle. Now, why does that matter, you say? Well, it was the bill that took all of the tax relief or tax cuts or tax adjustments from 2017 that were passed in the first Trump administration that were only for 10 years because we didn't have a way to pay to make them permanent for 10 years, and it made them permanent. Lower corporate income tax rates, lower individual rates, the depreciation issues. In addition to those things, we added on relief for folks who work for tips, folks who work overtime, a tax relief for folks over 65 in certain income categories, and made all of that permanent. So whether it's your personal budget or your business, you know from this moment on where you're going to be in the tax code. And that's not been the case in my career. It's bounced up and down depending on who was in control. That's an important positive thing. What else have we done that falls in the category of being positive? Well, from the House perspective, we have passed a transportation bill. From the House perspective, we passed a farm bill. From the House and Senate perspective, we did something last year that hadn't happened for a number of years. My neighbor, our fellow Oklahoman, Congressman Tom Cole, down in Moore, the 4th District of Oklahoma, chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, did something that hadn't happened for a long time. He almost single-handedly started the appropriations process from scratch and made it work again. We'd gone through a number of years of not being able to do the 12 bills and winding up with these short-term CRs, temporary spending bills, funding at previous numbers, or omnibus bills, just throwing everything in a bucket, or mini omnibus bills. Cole actually managed to get us back to the regular appropriations process. And if you're a community like Stillwater, or a university like Oklahoma State, or a variety of other things, you want that appropriations process to work because it gives us the ability to use our constitutionally authorized power to address how spending occurs. And it makes a difference on your infrastructure efforts. Right, Mayor? Right, my university friends? It makes a difference. So that's the positive. The challenging part this time is it's an even-numbered election year. It's a presidential, well, it seems like it's a constant presidential campaign, an even-numbered election year. And we're in the silly season, as I call it, and we'll see if we're able to make the appropriations process work a second time in a row. I would predict for you that probably in September, when we go back, and we go back on the 31st day of August, we're out now for the customary August work period, we'll do a number of things, temporarily fund the government into December, put a number of patches on things, but probably all the big bills won't be decided until we come back after Election Day in November. And then we'll see what the great American voter body has decided, and we'll determine where we go from there. And between Election Day and the beginning of the new session, first Monday in January, we'll sort things out. Setting that aside for a moment. Back to the Farm Bill for a moment. And as you know, it's dry in Oklahoma, and the farther west you go, the more miserable it is weather-wise. Call it a flash drought, call it a repeat of 2011 through 14, call it whatever you want. It is tough out there. Farm bills matter. Now, 80% of farm bills go to provide SNAP and WIC money and school lunch, the things that help us feed ourselves. But the other 20% of the farm bill are things like crop insurance, price protection programs, insurance-based concepts where you choose to participate if you want to, in effect, pay a premium, determine what kind of coverage you want, what kind of crops you want to participate in. But it's also rural development, agricultural research, farm credit. It's a whole myriad, conservation, it's a whole myriad of things. It matters to be able to feed ourselves. Getting this farm bill done, and it's a reflection of what's going on out there, is critically important because producers can't make it rain. Producers can't make the world powers keep the shipping lanes open. We can't control the things that affect our supplies and affect our outputs. We have to have a safety net in order to hold the process together. We can talk more about it in a minute if you care to. But I will say to my fellow Oklahomans, one of the things from the 14 Farm Bill was that for the first time we treated livestock producers like we treated crop producers. So the livestock indemnity programs, the livestock death programs, they're actually permanent law. They don't have to be reauthorized every 5 years. You still have to pay a premium, you still have to participate, but they're available there. So we'll work our way through that. We also need to pass something called the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, telling the Pentagon how to use the resources you provide as taxpayers to defend us and protect our interests around the world. The Senate needs to finish some version of a transportation bill so we can do a federal highway bill. The bill that spends the money that you pay into every time you buy a gallon of gasoline or a gallon of diesel, that motor fuel tax, user fee money. That's important. There's just a variety of things out there. So, setting all of those issues aside, the other challenges we face. The world is a complicated place. Yes, I'm ag. Yes, I'm financial services. Yes, I'm a 22-year veteran of the science committee. But the world's a complicated place out there. And sometimes I get some rather to the point and very understandable messages from my constituents on things like, I don't want to spend any money in the Ukraine. I don't want to have anything to do with the Ukraine war. I just would ask you to think about this. You can straighten me out in a moment if you care to. The Ukrainians did not invade Russia. Putin turned the Russian army loose on the Ukrainians. I went to a briefing the day after in D.C., and again, I'm not on armed services, I'm not on the I Spy committees, I'm not on intelligence. So I go to the briefings, we all get together. And the generals came in with all the stars and the bars and the admirals. And the day after the Russians invaded the Ukraine, they told us the Ukrainian army cannot withstand the Russian army. This will be over in 3 more days. It will take them 4 days to conquer Ukraine. 4 years later, the Ukrainians are still holding on. Still holding on. Now, are the Ukrainians perfect? Is anybody perfect? I can't answer that question for sure. But I would tell you, it's hard not to be with the underdog whose back is against the wall, defending their country, their property, their lives. It's hard not to be supportive of them. Step away from the Ukraine for a moment. Western Pacific, the Chinese. And I should word that the Chinese leadership. That's different than the Chinese people. The Chinese leadership. They seem to be bound and determined to dominate their region of the world. They seem to be determined to become the superpower of the planet. I would ask you to think about the Chinese system. The old communists understood that communism doesn't work. So over the last 40 years, they have introduced and allowed the development of market-oriented principles, not total economic freedom, but market-oriented principles. And it's set off an amazing industrial development in the country. But it is still a political dictatorship. It is still an intolerant society over freedom issues and religious issues. It's just the Central Committee has been a little more practical about how the money and the economics are handled. They have scared their neighbors in Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, the Philippines to death. And they are claiming that what they refer to now as the China Sea as their pond all the way out into the ocean. And they have spent money on Belt and Road and a number of other projects to buy infrastructure around the planet. They practice communist, I would like to refer to it as communist mercantilism. You remember the old economic system from 250 years ago? Bring all the money home and pay the peasants nothing everywhere else? They are a force to be dealt with. We can talk more about that in a moment if you care to. The last international issue is Iran. First off, let me say, since 1979, the religious leadership in Iran and their private army, the Republican Guard, which by the way is the closest thing to Hitler's SS I've seen in my lifetime, have a complete control over that country. It is a theocratic dictatorship. They don't care what the rank and file think in the streets. And we are in a situation there where there are circumstances, so many that are beyond our control. The president didn't consult with me when he made certain decisions. But I'll say this. You have to think about all the different layers of conflict in that part of the Middle East. First off, you've got the leadership of the country working hard to keep a grip on everybody. Remember the popular uprisings that have happened on and off in the last 3 or 4 years? When they go out to challenge the rioters in the streets who are advocating change in Tehran, They use shotguns on them and they shoot them in the face. That's barbaric. That's barbaric. But it's not just that conflict. You have the two factions of Islam, the Sunnis and the Shiites, which is why the Iranians and a number of their neighbors can't get along. They go back to when Muhammad died, who've been fighting over who should control the faith. That's a battle. There's hostilities towards their neighbors in Israel that go back thousands of years before that. Then there's the issue of their leadership's definition of a society is so dramatically from the open Western European or American model, they detest us because they can't tolerate the way we operate. All of these factors fit in. I can't say with any certainty how all this sorts out. I just know that things that have been boiling in some cases for almost a half a century, in some cases for thousands of years, have come to the top. And we'll see how all this sorts out. One last thought. Trade, international relationships, the military issues. President Trump, he's unlike any other president I've been around. And I've been around to everybody from George Herbert Walker Bush on down. I allude to my earlier comments about the intensity of opinions, the ability to change his mind, the way he goes about things. It's just different. It's part of why he's had a lot of success in the trade issues, because nobody can guess it. He drives the Chinese crazy on trade policy. It just drives them crazy. But that same set of strengths, I suppose you'd say, also make it a bit challenging to keep up with him. And we'll see how all these things play out. I throw on top of that the fact that every House seat's up this time in November, a third of the Senate, numerous governor races, and I understand you've interviewed all three governor candidates. Is that correct? In the last 3 weeks? Well, whisper to me after I leave who you think. I'll be curious. But that said, it's a complicated world. It's a challenging time. And I know I've just given you a heartwarming, reassuring, you'll sleep better at night, feel good about your pension fund kind of a presentation. But it's just the world we're in right now. And with that, Madam President, can I be brave and throw the floor open? I am still married to the same person. I paid my taxes on time, and I'm boring. That I want to open with.
Welcome home, fellow Aggie Congrad.
Absolutely.
We had classes together. So since you opened the door on the governor's race, I assume you won't answer this question, but you might wade in the waters. So this aluminum smelter plant that's proposed, obviously the two Republican candidates are opposite ends of that. Do you have an opinion on it? Thank you.
No, fair statement. Fair question.
Well, we were an FFA at the same time back in the day, and so we've known each other a while. So I thought.
And I've got another classmate in the room too, whether she'll admit it or not. Yes, absolutely. You know, the irony is in this state, and I spent 5.5 years in the legislature before I went to Congress. We spend all of our time trying to recruit business. We spend all of our time trying to bring outside investment in. We're very focused on all those efforts. But things have changed a little bit attitude-wise in the last 20 years. I represent all the open country in northwest Oklahoma. The first time these kind of issues bubbled up, it was electric transmission lines. Remember? Because they had to build the lines before they could put up electric windmills. And part of that problem was the first people who came in and bought up transmission lines, I'm amongst friends here, right? I mean, it's only going to be repeated 300 times. The right-of-way people came through and picked out absentee landlords, picked on folks who didn't have a clue what anything was worth, and lowballed. Well, you can skin one customer, but you don't get a repeat sale. So that made it incredibly difficult for everybody else trying to move more power around. Still is incredibly difficult. Then came the windmills to use the power lines. And some of those early contracts were a fixed amount of money for 99 years, basically, with no factor for the revenue that the windmill was generating. no real consideration of what you did after the windmill went away someday, they scalped some people. Well, the first on the scene got a sweet deal, but then they made it impossible and irritated everybody else. And then the other factor, as long as an instance with windmills, as long as they were so far out west that nobody could see the things, there was a general toleration. But you remember when the transmission lines became impossible to build, the wind developer said, let's just move closer to the customers. We won't have to have windmills. Do you know how they reacted in northwest Tulsa? In northwest Oklahoma City? Kaboom! So that set off the wind wars. And then the solar farms came after, which put someone like me in a tremendous jam because I'm a property rights oriented, business focused, open economy kind of guy. But when my constituents then came to me and said, we're trying to pass state laws to do this, that, and the other, and by golly, you should do that on the federal level. And my response was, so you're telling me to protect your vantage point, your neighbors can't do what they want to with their property? The balancing act issues come in. So, you get around to the smelting plant. We've had every kind of tax incentive for my almost adult life to try and encourage business. We'll see what happens. I've been around a day or two, you know.
I'm going to, for anybody doubted, I'm going to reveal my true position here. But is there any hope for a Reagan Republican like me that my party will ever come back to me?
Let me get a drink of tea here for a minute. Here's the challenge, fellow Reaganite. Because first time I hung out yard signs and put up fence hangers was Ronald Reagan, 1980. First time I participated in a campaign that we won was Ronald Reagan, Don Nichols. I can remember as a CR chairman going to a Republican meeting in 1980 in Payne County before the election and having a discussion about they wanted to put up Reagan stuff, but they didn't want to put up Don Nichols stuff. Well, Reagan was going to blow it out. Anyway, back to the core. The challenge you face is we have polarized, not just on the Republican side, the Democrat side, but everybody's moved off to the wings. My very conservative Republican brethren, they like to call themselves the Freedom Caucus. They're a force in the state legislature. Trish is very politely ignoring me. They're a force in the state legislature. But on the other side, they've got the Democratic Socialist subgroup within the Democratic Party, now in New York and the Michigan thing. So we've gone to the edge. Like yourself, I'm old school. I don't believe in compromise, but you can at least achieve consensus on the things you can agree on and go forward. Do the good you can do and go forward. But what has driven us to this point? Well, some of it goes back to these things and social media. You would be surprised the amount of stuff I get directly quoted from Sean Hannity and Rachel Maddow when I'm in public, depending on who you watched the night before. Or, if I have one more citizen ask me about the Nazi camp underneath the South Pole, Lord. I'm always flabbergasted, and humor me for a moment, I'm always flabbergasted that people quote me stuff on their smartphone who should know better. I have actually, at public events, said, okay, show me where you got that. Show me where you got that. They'll pull it up. I'll say, first off, what's the post date on it? I've seen stuff as long as 6 years ago be quoted to me. Oh. I said, okay, did you use that phone to cut and paste that author's name or that group's name that put it out to see who they are, where they come from? Well, no, let's do it. And sometimes you get the most amazing things. You can almost tell they're a Chinese or a Russian bot. Okay. I just try to get people to think through it. But that's helped drive us to the extremes. I would like to think we're in a time sort of like we have a political fever, and at some point the fever will break. It'll come back. I'll tell you one other side story. It involves one of my neighbors back home, and I'm not going to use a name, and some of you heard me say this before, but it is a classic example. I had a neighbor approach me a few years ago, an average kind of fella, who I've known all his life, and I like him a lot. And he said, Congressman, you folks in the government got to stop spying on me, because I don't want to be spied on, and I know you're spying on me. I said, Jerry, where'd you get this from? Well, it says so on my phone. You're spying on me. I said, Jerry, true story. I only tell true stories. Jerry, how long you had that phone? 5 years. I said, Jerry, you ever turn that phone off? No. I said, Jerry, when's the last time you bought something or thought about buying something you didn't punch it on that phone? Yeah. I said, Jerry, you ever notice how many things you get that reflect what you were looking at on the phone? Maybe your friend is Google and Amazon and those folks. Maybe they're the ones tracking you. Oh. And then I said, Jerry, I knew him well. I said, Jerry, in the last 3-4 years, have you ever done anything illegal or stupid that you didn't tell 6 people using that cell phone? Oh. I said, Jerry, maybe this is operator fault here more than the machine. Now, that's an over-exaggerated version of a true story, but these things are fun, but you gotta manage them like you would the gossip at the coffee shop or on the school ground or at the ball game or the golf course or anywhere else. You gotta strain through it, cross-reference, question, ask. By the way, Jerry, what were you looking at that you didn't want anyone to know? So, short answer back to the critical question is, right now, I would say in the country, you've got about a third who've gone one direction, a third who've gone the other, and it leaves a third in the middle. And that balance back and forth will determine where we go this fall and the world you and I will have. I'll add one caveat on top of that, and I say this respectfully, but I've spent a good bit of time in this process, every 2 years for a long, long time. Matter of fact, one of my favorite classes, and no disrespect to my ag econ or my ag school friends, but I, as a senior, managed to persuade my advisor, instead of taking that second stat class, God, I took poli-sci stat. So I slipped over to the poli-sci department, and the old professor spent one entire semester discussing polling. How to create your poll, how to ask your questions, where the semicolons were placed, where the commas were, how that affected the results, how to train now this is back in the old days of pick up a phone call, how to train your phone callers by the use of their voice to draw certain responses back, how you could, and how the sample mattered. I don't trust pollsters. I had a class at Oklahoma State. I know I don't trust them. But it's a situation where I would argue for some time now, at least in the presidential race, I hope it doesn't apply in congressional races, maybe it does too, in presidential races. How long has it been since anybody voted for someone as opposed to voting against someone? How long has it been since you voted for somebody as opposed to voting against? I would argue that if my Democrat friends had picked someone different than Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump might not have been president. I would argue that if Donald Trump hadn't been the Republican nominee for re-election in 20, Joe Biden wouldn't have gotten there either. I would argue that Kamala was a gift to Donald Trump in his last election. At some point, we have to get back to where we have people we can vote for. Got to vote for. But that also means, I'm coming to you, sir, that also means that people have to be engaged and participate and not make the decisions. Somebody over here. Yes, sir.
Congressman Lucas. I appreciate all you've done for the farmers and ranchers over the long time that you've served. My concerns are, number one, about food safety. I'm afraid to eat lettuce and jalapenos. I'm also concerned about the cow herd. And I know we can't control the weather, but the cost of entry, can we do anything to ease that other than import cattle from Venezuela and Argentina?
Let's talk about the vegetable issues for a moment. I have complete faith in the USDA inspection system. I have complete faith in the state departments of agriculture and how they handle the products raised here. But we have over time developed, and our neighbors have developed, these farms that aren't within the U.S. jurisdiction. I didn't say Mexico, not within the U.S. jurisdiction, and they don't always have the same standards. And that's where some of these health issues have come across. I can't imagine that it hasn't killed those particular industries south of the border for some time to come, because those are sanitation issues in the field that are getting us there. The livestock issue. I know hamburger is at an amazing price. Live cattle are the one part of the ag sector right now that's just going gangbusters. If you're row crop, if you're field crop, corn, wheat, cotton, it's tough out there. It's just tough out there. And the reason the price of hamburger is what it is twofold. Number one, we are at a historic low in live cow numbers. Linda and I are cow-calf people. Live numbers. But that reflects interest rates and trade wars and all sorts of uncertainty that caused people not to keep replacement cattle. And we've had crazy weather in the last decade. Crazy weather. You got to have something to feed them to keep them. And throw on top of that the lowest numbers in 70-some years on mama cows, almost 70 years. On top of that, something called the New World Screwworm Fly. Now that's an entire lesson in itself, because the New World Screwworm Fly. I won't get to the raunchy part, I promise, Rep. But the point being, these little monsters came out of Central America, appeared in Florida in the 1930s, and by the 1950s they were from Florida all the way to Arizona. I don't remember them, but my father and grandfather used to talk about going out every day in calving season, and every so many days when they weren't calving. And if you had an animal with a nick, a scratch, or a newborn with a wet navel, you had some kind of, I suppose, iodine and something, you painted them. Because if you didn't address the wounds, these flies would zero in on and lay eggs. Now, not to be gross, but the difference between the New World Screwworm fly and every other kind of fly is, every other kind of fly likes dead flesh. New World Screwworm flies are carnivores. They're meat eaters. They like live flesh. And if you leave them unaddressed, one will lay 500 eggs. That'll attract 100 more flies. And in a couple weeks, a cow will just dissolve. They'll just eat them alive. So in the 1950s and 60s, land-grant universities and the ARS system, using that wonderful thing called research, advancing knowledge, science, came up with a way to deal with little monsters. And it didn't involve pesticides or insecticides. They came up with the idea, because the screwworm fly only mates one time in its life cycle, to create these hatcheries and raise 500 million flies a week, and then bombard them with x-rays, sterilize them. Notice I didn't say radiation. Please don't ever say radiation. X-rays. We've all had bones x-rayed. X-ray them. And you'd go dump them out where there was a fly problem. The sterile males would mate with the females, break the cycle, and over time, over almost 2 decades, we pushed them out of the United States, pushed them out of Mexico, pushed them across the border, all the way to the Panama Canal. So it was a triumph of science and our investment in agriculture research. But here's the cautionary tale on the side of it. Sometime in the 90s, the folks at OMB, Office of Management Budget, and the bean counters on the Appropriations Committee said, why are we paying to raise 500 million flies a week? They're all in Panama. This is a stupid use of money. So they turned down the fly production. Got us down to 100 million flies. Well, that's still okay because you're paying your neighbors from the Rio Grande River all the way to the Panama Canal to monitor, to watch. And we have flies. Then from the 100 million a week fly factory we maintained in Panama, you'd bombard them, break the cycle. But a little thing happened on the way. Our neighbors to the south, I'll word this very carefully, were no longer able to effectively do the monitoring. I worded that carefully, Doc. And the little monsters got out of control and started the march back and have made it into Texas. So we are ramping up production in Panama, paying for a new fly factory in Mexico, building a new fly factory in South Texas. We are, I'm told, and I'm an Ag Econ guy, not an ANSI, not a biology guy, I'm told that we have tweaking the breeding program so that instead of 50% males and 50% females, because it's the males that matter, maybe we can get 60 or 70% males. I don't have a clue. So to have that many more. And the other element, I am told, my father said when he was a kid, everybody had a milk cow. Everybody had an old Jersey cow. But there was only one Jersey bull in the whole county because that's all it took. Obviously, nobody remembers milk cows in the backyard. But understand, there's a... Anyway, just believe me. Just take my word for it. So supposedly, we are breeding or selecting for an enhanced male screwworm fly. So we're going to breed Casanovas, or Jersey screwworm flies, however you want to describe them. And between the two, we'll get this under control. It's just going to take a little time. We need an incredibly hard, cold winter to slow down the flies and the ticks. If you've been out in the countryside, we have lots of ticks these days too. Get that under control. We'll push the flies back to Panama. The cow numbers will come back up as the weather gets better. Hamburger will come down, and my spouse will not be as excited about being a cow-calf operator as she is right now. One other side caveat to get to your question. The administration has suggested at different times, because they were focused on the price of hamburger, about how to bring in more supply to suppress the price, right? The Argentine thing. Well, the fact is there wasn't enough extra cattle in Argentina to matter. It just didn't matter. And you can only fake out the supply and demand numbers for so many days. Futures market would hammer, and then we go back to normal because you can't fake the supply numbers. The decision was made, starting on August 24, to open a section of the border in Arizona to cattle coming across from Mexico. Now, part of the argument is the flies are farther from that set of ports of entry than they are from us here. Okay, true or not, let's accept that. But I would suggest to you the reason that this is happening is the pressure from the feedlot people and the packers is incredible. Because the Mexicans sell us a lot of cattle. And since May of 2025, they've not been able to bring any Mexican cattle across the border. Now, Mexican cattle are not going to become ribeyes and T-bones. They're not going to compete for your prime rib for Thanksgiving. They're hamburger grinders. Grinders. So, the logic, I suppose, is more hamburger meat will lower the price on that side of the equation. If one fly comes across on one animal, can you imagine what's going to happen? So somebody's taking a deep breath to make this decision.
Well, the cost of entry is tough to get a new kid graduated from college.
Yeah.
Cost of entry.
And we're caught in a trap now because as high as cattle prices are, any of you who've been to a public land auction prior to the dry weather in the last couple of months, that's changed things, or went to a school land lease auction, they reflect cattle prices. A little piece of property that Linda and I have rented from school land. I'm going to wind down. From school land, literally public auction 3 times what it was for the previous 5-year lease. Okay, it's reflected in that. Bottom line is this, and I want to thank all of you fine Rotarians before you nominate Nathan to take my place in Congress. That I appreciate the opportunity to be with you. It's a complicated world. We'll work our way through the process. There's a rhyme and reason, even though sometimes it's really difficult to work with. And if I look a little frustrated when you see me, understand before I was a member of Congress, actually before the 2014 Farm Bill, my hair wasn't this color. I didn't take a hypertension pill every morning. I didn't do a statin pill every morning. It's just part of the challenge we face. But you decide ultimately which way we go in this country at all levels. And I trust you more than I do a lot of the folks I serve with. So again, thank you, Madam President.
One more.
Oh, absolutely.
If the response is quick.
Absolutely. I will try.
Thank you for being here, Congressman Lucas. My name is Joe Aiken. I'm with Stillwater Medical Foundation. As you know, Oklahoma hospitals are under incredible financial pressure right now. Stillwater Medical is a not-for-profit. We are projecting that we are going to have a reduction in funds of $110 million over 10 years due to the big, beautiful bill. Recently, OHCA came out and proposed another $218 million in funding reductions to hospitals in our state. At the same time, due to the ACA subsidy changes and other provisions in the big beautiful bill, Oklahoma could see dramatically above 300,000 people without insurance by the end of 2027. That's going to mean that much more pressure on our hospitals. What's that going to result in? You're going to see layoffs. You're going to see service lines cut. You're going to see hospitals converting to emergency only. You're going to see closures. All those things are happening right now. And without being dramatic, it's going to turn into more deaths in Oklahoma because we're not going to have ready access to good quality services. At the same time, our federal government is going out and spending hundreds of billions of dollars on things that just don't seem as meaningful to me. So my question is, sorry, take me a long time to get there. How do you I know you're a healthcare advocate, but how do you reconcile the support of the spending that's going on while at the same time all these cuts that are going to dramatically impact your constituents right here in our state? And just trying to figure out where are we going and what are you going to do to help the hospitals that support the people in our state?
I appreciate your point entirely. I would simply say there'll never be enough money to do everything that we need to do. So the challenge is how to most efficiently and effectively use that. And you and your hospital brethren and all healthcare consumers need to make that point clear, especially the committees of jurisdiction, Ways and Means and Ways and Means in the House and Senate Finance in the committee, because these issues will be readdressed. They will be readdressed. And I've got every size from your facility, every size all the way down to my hometown of Cheyenne, which is 6 beds and 2 swings, and we turned our operating room into an expanded emergency room, and we're basically a helo triage station, which, by the way, haven't been run over by a bull 3 years ago. That's not a bad thing to have, an option for that. You know, sometimes oxy and morphine are good things when you really need them. We just got to keep working on this together, and your brethren also need to help push the whole federal delegation. Nothing that's ever been done can't be adjusted or undone.
Thank you, Congressman.